Okay everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're back on GT Sport and we're back with the FIA Nations Round number 7 at Tokyo Expressway in heavy rain conditions at night time. So this was a single make race driving the Emerson Fittipaldi GRX car. This was a very difficult race for myself to get qualifying sorted. We did find out just before this race, we did the first race, and then in the practice session I started to realise that really aggressive downshifting in qualifying, although it wears your tyres out quite fast, it actually really helped your stopping distance and you were able to brake a lot later using that method. And I managed to do my best time of all the practices that I'd done, because we started doing this, and got a 202.9. Now it was still 3-4 attempts off, but considering we had only just found out about this method, it managed to bump me up to P8 there. You can see just starting behind Calster in P7, and from this position there should be chances to work our way forward. A lot of people making mistakes in these races. Obviously the heavy wet condition, consistency was vital. This was in top split, this was a no stop race. You just had to do a little bit of tyre management, look after them tyres all the way through to the last few laps of the race, because I think that the one stop actually worked out about 1 to 2, maybe 3 seconds slower. So it was just much more sensible to do a no stop, avoid any traffic, and also dirty air. If you go and pit and then come out behind 3 or 4 cars that are on a no stop, they're just going to hold you up through the middle sector, because it's so hard to follow cars with this car through the fast corners. A lot of downforce, surprising amount of downforce generated by this car, that it really did give a lot of the dirty air off. You'll see it in the deltas when people are going through the middle sector, and also for myself, I tend to struggle with following cars, so it was a little bit of an issue for myself at this track, the middle sector, trying to stay anywhere near other cars during that part of the track. But we're starting from P8, a lot of opportunities available here. During this stream I was feeling very ill, I have to say. I was really run down, my throat was completely destroyed, I hardly could talk, and I just wanted to get a solid result. As you've seen Calcer there from the start of the race, he tried to preempt the start slightly. You can do it and make it work very well, but he went a fraction too soon. I think he got held on the line for about half a second, which has caused him to drop down the order by a few places. I got a reasonable start. I nearly also followed Calcer there. We're seeing him go. He kind of preempted me into starting that a little bit earlier, but luckily I got away with it. As we go down into turn 1, you see a lot of cars side by side. I decided to brake very early. There's no point risking diving up the inside there, as we see TX3 Steve Gaiman just basically push his way through without braking. A little bit naughty in my view. He just completely, I don't know if he missed his brakes or just went way too aggressive into turn 1. Not the most sensible driving I've seen, but he gets away with it and carries on. I was a bit annoyed on stream, because I felt like if you're going to do something like that, you really should be backing off and letting cars back through, because it could have ended in disaster. That he just basically pushed his way through a gap that wasn't there. But everyone gets away so far. We're down into P9. We've lost a position from that start, mainly because of that move by Steve Gaiman as we go through this very tricky section. Now a lot of aggressive driving up ahead, which is very dangerous at the opening lap with these cars as we go through this right hand corner now, and you see cars everywhere. There's been contact, the car stops right in front of us, which we end up wiping out because he just suddenly stopped in front of me. No time to react to that. I don't know exactly what happened there, but it's a bit of a nightmare. You see Fatal Vasca picking up 11.5 seconds worth of penalty, so that is his race 100% over. You ain't recovering from that. He's going to be probably down in last place with an incident like that on lap 1. But for me, this is okay. We're going to be bumped up to P6 now, right behind Devil, as Calcer goes down the left, brakes very late. I kind of got out the way of the car that was taking the penalty, and probably a good job I did, because Calcer seemed to brake very late there as we try and get on the power now and see if we can make a move on Devil, because he's not going to have to slipstream down this straight. I'm going to be picking up the tow all the way down this very long straight at Tokyo. You've got Calcer behind us also. He's going to be picking up that slipstream and looking to probably take advantage of any move that I make on Devil, as well as we're going to get right in that tow now. You can see generating that extra speed. You can see the delta just coming down and down and down. It's so powerful, the slipstream on this straight, and this should be able to put me in position to go for a move into turn 1. Is Devil going to go defensive? He's probably going to stay down that right hand side. He stays to the right hand side to cover the inside. I'm going to pick up a little bit more of tow there to go down the left hand side, brake extremely late, but slam down them gear shifts to really slow the car down, you see, and that makes Devil go a little bit wide into the corner. We undercut him, and a very, very nice overtake. Calster also follows through there, taking advantage of Devil running wide. Very clever driving by myself there. What I did, I stayed wide and I really aggressively, I used up a bit of tyre life by doing it, but I slammed the gears all the way down because that will stop the car a little bit faster in these conditions for some reason. I don't know if that's a bug in the game because I don't think that's how you do it in real life. It very much reminds me of how you used to drive the original Project cars when you used to just downshift unbelievably fast. But it does work. It will chew your tyre life up though as we go through this middle sector now. And now from this position, I've just got to really try and concentrate on looking after the tyres because we've got Calster in our slipstream. This track again was very hard for cars to follow. As long as I've got clean air, he should find it very hard to be able to make a move on myself. He'd have to be within about 7-8 tenths of a second getting onto the power off the final corner to be able to go for a move into turn 1. And as you can see there, going into the final corner, he is around 1.1 seconds back, so if he does manage to get a very nice traction off the final corner, he might be able to get into a very nice slipstream range. Although we're going into that corner very tight. I did like this favoured line through the corner. It was something we picked up off of watching Sonic through that final corner. He took it very tight, enabling him to straight line the exit a little bit better, and that was in Group 3 I seen him doing that. So I started using that method for this and it kind of worked. You've seen Calster didn't get the traction from there. We're going to skip ahead a lap later and you can see Calster still around 1 second behind. We've got a lot of battling going on in front of us. We've got Manuel Rodri and the Oscuro driver in P3 now battling away. That's given me the ability to pick up a toe now down the straight, which is going to give me a little bit of a helping hand. You've seen that Calster was actually about 7-8 tenths behind me there. Now I think if I didn't manage to pick up that toe on that corner, Calster might have been able to make a move into turn 1. It still would have been a very hard overtaking position because we would have probably been going side by side into turn 1. And if, as long as you hold the inside line into turn 1, I found it fairly easy to defend against drivers as we now pick up that slipstream down the straight. You can see that Calster's around 1.1 seconds back. We're 7 tenths away from Manuel Rodri picking up that toe all the way down into turn 1 now. And again, you can see fairly comfortable, no need to worry about behind us. We've just got to see what goes on in front of us as Manuel Rodri does that cutback that we did on Devil. It works very well. You trick the driver into braking very late, they miss the apex, and then you just start up the inside and take that position off. So Manuel Rodri back into P3 and now probably going to push on. Manuel Rodri was doing very good tyre management during these races as well with a very good race pace. As we watch that replay camera at this track, it looks absolutely amazing in these conditions, in this heavy wet conditions at night. These cars obviously with the lights on, it really did look stunning. You see, look how close this racing still is in this race. You know, high powered cars, very long track, and still very close racing even with that dirty air, which is very, very hard to follow on. I know a lot of people might think that we lie about this dirty air, but it is very difficult to follow other cars, especially in high grip cars like these, high downforce cars, especially in wet conditions as well, to follow with that understeer that's generated through the front tyres on that middle sector. But everyone doing quite a good job at the moment. You can see how close everyone is there, kind of swinging the car through them corners. You can see the way the body of the car kicking the rear out slightly. Everyone doing very similar racing lines through there to get the rotation on the rear of the car, obviously whilst in that dirty air as we go through to that final corner now. At the end of lap 4, and Oscuro driver in front of us goes very, very wide there. You see, he takes a very unusual line, and that's going to give me a nice slipstream all the way down this straight. Again, you can see that obviously Calster around that 8-9 tenths margin back. You really need to be about 6-7 tenths at this point of the track to be able to consider a side-by-side into turn 1. So he's a little bit too far back, but also with the fact that I'm picking up the slipstream from the Oscuro driver, that's going to really hinder any chance he's got of overtaking me on this lap as we're coming to the end of lap, the end of lap 4, starting lap 5 now. You can see the gap to P1 around 5, just coming up to 4.5, nearly 5 seconds. We're in that dirty air now to P4, which we know I really do struggle when in any sort of slipstream to another car in high grip cars. I really don't like it. I like a really positive front end on the car. That's why I think I tend to suffer so much with the understeer. I am starting to get a little bit better with it. You just got to brake that little bit earlier, chuck the car in that little bit earlier, and counter that understeer that is generated from being in a slipstream. But it's not my favourite thing to be right close to another car. So just trying to take it very easy as well. What you'll notice is during this race, being very progressive on the throttle. This is a long race, it's a 32-minute race, being progressive on the throttle because we're doing that no stop, being very gentle on downshifting. So you'll see into some of the corners when I need to brake and slow the car down aggressively if we're trying to defend or if we're trying to overtake another car, I will be aggressive. But other than that, I'm trying to be quite progressive with each downshift. Sometimes I was being quite aggressive, but mainly the area where I was being maybe a little bit too aggressive was the final corner, because I wanted to get the car slowed down to take that very tight line. But that then gives you the ability to take a more of a straight line through that corner on the acceleration, which kind of looks after the rear tyres. So that's kind of the benefit, that you take a trade-off with that heavy braking to get that car into the apex nice and early. You'll see it here, quite aggressive on downshifting into second gear, so that I can bite it into this apex. You'll see that line I take, and then I cut over the curb here and straighten the car from there. From this point, you see my line is a lot different to the car in front, and that's because then I don't have to put the steering angle in on acceleration, which prevents the car spinning up the rears, and was also giving me very good traction. But you can see Calster on this lap got very good traction off that final corner, and I'm not in the slipstream to P4, so we're going to have to probably do some defensive driving now into turn 1. You can see Calster picking up the slipstream. I'm going to go to the left hand side here now. We're going to stay all the way to left until we need to go to the right hand side. You can see he's getting closer. Now I'm going to drift the car over to the right hand side to take the inside line into turn 1. We're going to have to do some very late braking, and what you're going to see here now is what I talk about in terms of slamming the gears down, because this is the only time you're going to do it when defending. We're going to brake pretty much just before the 150 and really aggressively downshift into second gear, and look at that, it still manages to hold the line to the inside because we're so aggressive on the downshifts. And I managed to defend that line very well into turn 1 and hold on to this P6 or P5 sorry, in this race on lap number 6. But what you can see now is that little bit of battling with Calster there has actually dropped us away from P3 and P4. Obviously Manuel Rodri pushing on to try and get Bilster. Now P4's got about a 2.5 second lead over myself. The only advantage from this is, from my point of view, is there's not really much point in me overdriving the car at this phase of the race. The strategy for this race, I think Calster was on a pretty similar strategy of trying to look after the tyres as much as possible. So P4 obviously pushing very aggressive. I think Manuel Rodri just had the pace with looking after tyres. He was able to push on and still look after the tyres. But for myself, you can see my brake bias all the way to the front. The reason we do that is because it creates less temperature in the rear tyres when braking, and less resistance basically to the rear tyre. So you're going to look after the rear tyres. Now if you have a little look at the tyre delta, the tyre telemetry, you can see that the rear tyres are wearing faster. That's because this car, obviously, MR is going to use up the rear tyres. In the wet conditions, it tends to spin the rear tyres. So you want to put as much heat and wear into the front tyres in conditions like that. That's why you'll see a lot of drivers in wet conditions, in MR cars, etc., moving their bias forward to try and save the rear tyres as much as possible as we go down the main straight. Now I think in qualifying I did actually run it -3 as we skip through to lap 10. You can see the consistency. We had no one in front of us. It was fairly simple driving for a few laps there, keeping the consistency, very consistent lap times. If you have a little look on that right hand side, you can see that we were 203, 203, 203, 203 all the way up. Really nice driving. I was actually quite surprised with my consistency considering how rough I felt during this race. I was happy with that, and that is bringing it down to looking after the tyre. So if your drive is smooth, you try and keep your lap times fairly similar. We've had a little bit of battling, some overtakes to do, but we've managed to keep the lap times all within 3 or 4 attempts of each other. And at a track in wet conditions with a car like this, as long as this as well, over a 2-minute lap, that's quite an achievement, I think, to keep that sort of consistency all the way through the race. And that is going to benefit us towards the end as well if the tyres are in really good condition. As you see, we've got a bit of a gap now to P4. They've managed to increase that lead to around 3.5 seconds. You can see the P1's around 6.2, 6 seconds ahead. I think the gap was around 6 seconds pretty much for the last 2 or 3 laps. We were matching P1 at this point of the race now, not really losing anything to him, keeping it very stable, the gap. So P1's pace obviously possibly drove it very aggressive on the opening few laps to build up a lead, and now he's probably trying to maintain the tyre life a little bit as we go through into the final corner now. Again, you can see how close that racing is between P2, 3 and 4. Very close racing. When you can see them that close ahead of you, you really got to try and concentrate on keeping it smooth, because you don't want to overdrive the car to get closer, because in wet conditions I always find that sometimes if you overdrive, not only do you kill the rear tyres, but you also end up making more mistakes. It's all about trying to keep it nice and smooth and consistent. As you can see myself weaving up from the right hand side to the left hand side, because we've got Calster in that slipstream gaining and gaining and gaining. I haven't got a slipstream to defend against him, you can see. So he's going to be possibly having a look to make a move maybe at the end of the straight, but is he going to be close enough? He's 7.7, just under 7/10 of a second behind. He's probably a little bit too far to be able to make a move into turn 1, so I'm going to keep the normal racing line. You can see he's 4/10 back. He's too far back there to make a move, so just keeping the braking fairly smooth into turn 1, not downshifting too aggressively, because we need to keep them tyres alive for these last few laps in this race. As you saw the rear getting very, very twitchy there. Obviously, I'm needing to push as much as possible while keeping the rears alive. So the advantage I've got though is I should be able to keep the tyres a little bit better condition than Calster. Obviously, Calster's suffering in this middle sector with being in the slipstream. He gains down the straight, obviously, because he's gaining 4/5, maybe half a second or so from the slipstream. But through this sector, it's very hard for him to stay with myself without using a lot of tyre life up, whereas I'm able to keep the same type of pace without putting as much pressure on them rear tyres by just being a little bit smooth. I've got more front end grip, so I don't have to chuck the car into these corners as aggressively as you would have to if you were in that dirty air. But what you can see now is we're starting to close that gap up to P4, so this was really interesting at this point of the race. We've got 3 or 4 laps to go. I could see that the gap is getting much closer, and we've got, looks like P2, 3 and 4 are starting to either struggle on tyre or P2 struggling on tyres. Manuel Rodri obviously putting a lot of pressure on P2, and this is going to work in my favour in terms of maybe closing back up to them and making an attempt to get ourselves onto the podium in this race. As you see, look how close that gap is. You can see all 3 cars there battling away. They've all got the dirty air. The advantage I've got at this stage of the race is no dirty air means better tyres for the last few laps. As we go down the straight now to finish this lap and start the last 4 laps of this race. So this is where the real the smoothness that we've done for the opening 10 laps. You can see the consistency in the lap times still all within the 203s. Real nice consistent driving, keeping it smooth. This is going to pay off hopefully towards the end as I'm trying to break the slipstream to Calster. You can see there going all the way over to the left. I can see Calster's picking up a massive toe now in our mirror. Is he going to be able to make a move into turn 1? He's going to be able to pick up a severe amount of speed down this straight now, but I think he might be a little bit too far back before he's going to be able to make that move. I stay to the right hand side, and again using that aggressive downshift technique to slow the car down for the apex of this corner. And again, got the car into apex, now onto the throttle. We don't want Calster to get past, so aggressively on the throttle there, using a little bit of tyre life up and losing a bit of time to P4 there. You can see obviously with that little bit of battling, having to defend, we lose a few temps in terms of the time that we've gained, but we're still 2.7 seconds behind, maybe lost 2 temps like I say, nothing too drastic. Still got the clean air in this middle sector now, so Calster isn't going to be able to get that close obviously once we get through this section, obviously as well with the tyres getting more and more worn. But what we did find out in this race was the middle sector, you didn't tend to lose too much time when the tyres wore at the back, because it kind of rotated the car very nicely. You kind of got this sensation that the rear was losing a bit of traction, so it kind of drifted through the corner, enabling the car to rotate much better, which was actually quite a nice feeling. The only problem with it was when you needed to get on the power, you found that the rears were starting to like lose that vital grip and bite out of the final corners. You see on the power there, the rear almost sliding out and going a little bit sideways. But what you can see now on the Delta is we're coming into the last few laps and we're getting very close to P4. You can see almost picking up the slipstream. So into this final corner, taking that very tight line to see if I can just grab a bit of toe. See P4 almost losing traction. And this again is where the advantage, taking the line that I do through there, it basically gives you less chance of losing the rear end. But you can see now that we're in that toe to P4, the rear wants to start losing control, because you've got that dirty air. When putting the power down, the rears are losing grip. But just about managed to stay in the slipstream there. We gained 3 or 4 attempts on that final corner, and that was really important, because now that I've got the slipstream, still got the slipstream, you can see I'm losing it slightly, but we've got a bit of a toe all the way up this hill. We just about lose it now. That's gave me enough speed to probably be safe into turn 1 and not really have to drive overly defensive to Calster behind. So that's going to help out now, and we're getting closer and closer. And one thing, it probably helps not to be in the dirty air through this middle sector. Although going through this final corner, you can see gaining a little bit again, and I think you can see we're very close to picking up slipstream. Again, Oscar driver in front of us hitting that wall. He seems to be really starting to struggle with them tyres and maybe overdriving it, as Manuel Rodri manages to squeeze himself passing into P2 in this race, as we could jump on board with the replay cameras again for this lap as we go through the middle sector. And this lap we were in and out of the slipstream, so we were around 1.6 and 1.4 seconds behind the car in front, and then it'd be back up to 1.6. So what basically was happening was, every time I was picking up the slipstream, I was losing again because of the loss of aero on the front end of the car. So the main aim was just trying to stay around 1.5, so that on that final corner I can take that tight line and then pick up his slipstream down the main straight. And if I can make that work, that will give me the extra speed down the straight to defend against Cal. So you see sparks flying off the walls. I see quite a lot of people doing this. Specifically in the last corner, I did notice some drivers kind of using the wall to help them brake, which was it was a bit of a weird thing to see. I think you should probably get a penalty if you're doing that all the time and basically wall riding to slow the car down. You'll see that some people do it into this final corner. You see it there, the sparks flying. I don't know if it was Dilster that was doing it, but he did seem to be using the wall slightly to help him slow down. It was a surprise to myself that that wasn't given a penalty, because I know it's a strange one. I do know that there was a bug on this track as well. I think some of the lower splits were using it through turn 1 and wall riding all the way around the outside. So hopefully that's something that Polyphony will look at and get it fixed. But from that final corner, you can see got very good traction there, picking up the slipstream all the way down the straight. Now that's going to give me the ability again to keep that Calster away from me. He's not going to be able to make a move with the draft that I'm picking up from P4. But we're getting in a position now to possibly go for a move on either this lap or the next lap to P4. You can see getting very close to battle for P3. I think Manuel Rodri has managed to pull himself far enough away now that he's secured that P2 position. And if you look at the delta to P1, we've actually gained 3 or 4 attempts on him since lap 10. So the pace was 100% there to battle for, you know, in terms of race pace. It's just a lot of it came down to that qualifying that we didn't really know how to do it with, in terms of the heavy downshifting, and also with that pretty messy opening lap, we lost quite a little bit of time to the leader. And I think that really helped GTA Creaser pull out a lead, because I think Manuel Rodri probably had the best pace overall in this race from the drivers that were in here. He had very, very good race pace all the way to the end, so obviously doing very good tyre management as well, while keeping good race pace, you know, into the, I think he was in the 202s. I think the fastest lap was by the Oscar driver, but I'm not sure if that was slipstream assisted on the final straight. I'm not sure about that as we go through this section. You see in front of us P4 getting so close to losing it, hitting the wall. He's looking very ragged. It does look like the tyres are starting to fade on the car in front of us. We've got Dilster, who's also looking a bit ragged, but what's probably happening as well is the Oscar driver's picking up that dirty air. We're in the dirty air as well, but if you've got really worn tyres, if you've been a bit too aggressive in them early laps, the worn tyres in the dirty air are going to make the car very, very difficult to drive and very difficult to get on traction as well as we go into that braking again, trying to take that very tight line. You can see it's getting harder and harder to slow the car down into this final corner. But again, I take that very tight line, and you see the difference in the line that I take here. It enables me to straight line the acceleration much more, and that has given me very, very nice traction now right behind the Oscar driver. Are we going to be able to go for a move into turn 1? It looks like we might be able to. It looks like he's actually lost the slipstream to P3, so if we can pick up a P4 on this final lap, that'll be a nice result from this race, considering how rough we felt as well during the live stream. So picking up the slipstream, am I going to go to the right hand side? I was going to go to the right hand side around now, but then he covers very late. It was extremely late. It nearly caught me out that I thought that it was a little bit risky of being a bit late trying to cover that right hand side, but maybe it was a late call. I stay down the left hand side. Now we're going to try and cut back across him. You can see I've managed to get the car ahead. We're going to cut across to the right hand side, brake as late as possible with that heavy downshifting, and actually make the car slow down really nicely, get it into the apex on the power, and another very nice move into turn 1, putting myself up into P4 in this race. Some really nice racing going on in this Tokyo wet at night. Also looked absolutely amazing. I actually really enjoyed this race. Once you've got the consistency, once you've got good drivers around you that respect the track and stuff, it was really enjoyable to be racing this combination. I'm surprised more people didn't do it. I think some people are put off by the wet weather, but I actually really enjoy driving in these wet conditions. I find that being smooth and consistent really does help in these wet conditions. As you see P3 using that wall again, rebounding off the wall to kind of chuck it into the corner. Very risky strategy, but it's definitely got some good pace. As we come through to these final corners in the race, you see losing a bit of time on that sector, but I was mainly gaining my time over the lap on the final corner because we were saving them tyres, so that was giving us better traction. And also that line that I was taking, the line that I learned from Sonic when we were watching the entry point and the way he was doing that in the Group 3 race, it really did help in terms of traction coming through that final corner. So again, looking down this level, you can see the sparks flying off Dale, so that's what he was doing. I did notice it, he was kind of like using the wall to help him slow down into the final corner, which was really strange, but I'm surprised it didn't get a penalty, to be honest, because with GT's penalty system, you run the risk with stuff like that. But getting nice traction out the final corner. You can see Calster also got past the Oscaro driver. I think the Oscaro driver's tyres were pretty much toast. I think they died a death and they had nothing left on them. But we're going to go down the main straight now to finish this race in P4. A very solid position considering we started PA, and some reasonable points from this race. And 100%, I was really happy with that, because not feeling 100% and coming home in P4 with a very, very solid drive, a very consistent drive as well. Something that is very important in these races is to keep the consistency, because for a no-stop race, you've got to keep them tyres alive all the way to the end and maintain the lap consistency to keep the rears from obviously wearing out too fast. So we pick up just under 2.4k points, some reasonable points there, and move on to the next round. I hope you enjoyed that video. I thoroughly enjoyed that race. Please hit that like button if you enjoyed it, and also if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, hit that subscription button and also hit that notification button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks again for watching, everyone.